As night fell, strange noises began to echo in the quiet houses. Stories about loneliness and fear of being home alone are not just products of the imagination. They are vivid memories, terrifying experiences that many people have had to face. From mysterious sounds to stealthy figures, each story carries a message of warning. There may be something lurking in the darkness, waiting to disrupt your peace. Prepare yourself, because the following stories will take you on a haunting and scary journey. Story 1: Strange Voice in the Silent Night. That Saturday night, the house seemed to be in absolute silence. I am the only person at home. All the rooms are deserted. No lights are on. Only the pale moonlight creeps through the window, creating long, dark shadows on the floor. I fell into a deep sleep, feeling the steady beat of my heart in my chest while surrounded by the peace of the night. But then my sleep was torn apart by an unexpected sound, the sound coming from my phone on the bedside table. It was Siri. The lifeless voice rang out in the middle of the night, making the quiet space suddenly become heavy, as if it was warning something. I felt an uncomfortable feeling rising in my heart, hesitated for a few seconds before reaching out to turn off the phone. Even though I told myself that this was just a problem, deep down, I still couldn't shake the insecurity creeping into my mind. I went back to bed, trying to find sleep again, but those strange noises kept echoing in my head. And time passed. The house fell into silence, but that silence only lasted for a moment. An hour later, I was awakened again, this time by the same voice I had tried to ignore. Siri spoke again. The sound was no longer as simple as before, but carried something strange, as if it was answering a question I had never asked. Thursday, July 4th, 1776, the cold words rang out, making my heart clench. For some reason, this answer made me feel more insecure than anything I had ever experienced. That date had no meaning to me, but it had a dark and haunting feeling. Still, I tried to convince myself that this was just another technological glitch, a random mistake, and I tried to continue sleeping. But fear still clung to me, like invisible shadows lurking in every corner of the room. The whispers seemed to be just a product of the imagination, but they were too clear, too vivid to be ignored. Not long after, my sleep was once again interrupted by a strange sound. This time, it wasn't just a hollow echo, but a voice with chilling authenticity. Siri pronounced my full name accurately, clear and sharp, as if it knew me better than anyone. Then the voice continued, not with a question, but with a cold assertion: "Here is information about your name." It felt like there was an electric current running down my spine. I felt like I was being watched and controlled by some invisible entity. Panic came, covering my entire body, and there was no reason left strong enough to calm myself anymore. I jumped up from the bed and rushed out of the room as if something was following me. My feet led the way to my parents' room, where I thought I could find safety in the dark. I slammed the door behind me, locking it, trying to shield myself from whatever was lurking outside. That whole night, I huddled in the corner of the room, my mind constantly spinning with a series of unanswered questions. The dim light of my phone screen still haunts me, along with the sound of Siri's voice, cold and emotionless. Is it all just a technological glitch, or is there really some force trying to contact me from somewhere I can't see? Those thoughts made it impossible for me to fall asleep again, and the darkness of the night seemed even thicker, covering everything, leaving only me and the fear that was eating away at my soul little by little. Story 2: The Unexpected Intruder. At 2 a.m., my room was silent, save for the clicks and sounds of a video game being played on my computer. It was winter outside, and I was alone in the house, completely immersed in the virtual world of the game. Suddenly, a knock on the window rang out, breaking the silence of the night. I turned my head towards the window. The light from the computer screen shined, but no one was there. Because of the cold weather, I kept the windows closed, and my room was on the first floor. Although I was a little worried, I quickly calmed myself down. Maybe this was just someone's joke, I told myself, and to not show fear, I closed the curtains, shielding everything from outside light. Silence returned, and I tried to focus on my game, forgetting about the tapping on the window. However, the knocking on the door appeared again, this time urgent and relentless, as if an invisible force was trying to invade my private space. Anxiety rose within me. A feeling of insecurity covered my entire body. Unable to stand this disturbance, I decided to open the curtains and pull out the window just to see what was going on outside. As soon as I opened the slightest crack, the stillness of the night was broken by a cold and terrifying chill. Two hands suddenly appeared from the darkness outside, grabbed the bottom of the window and forcefully pushed it upward. I felt danger approaching, and a feeling of dread rose within me. In a panic, I started screaming and swinging my arms continuously, punching the man in black, whose face was obscured by a hood. This man showed no signs of giving in. He tried to squeeze into the room, his body hard and determined. I quickly grabbed the desk lamp, which was the only tool available at hand, and hit him hard on the head with it. The table lamp collided violently, causing him to fall out. Taking advantage of that opportunity, I quickly pushed the window back into place and locked it tightly. I saw a man in black running from the house, disappearing into the darkness of the night. My heart beat fast and strong tremors constantly passed through my body. The feeling of panic and terror could not fade, and I realized that I had just experienced an unimaginable situation. It was a terrible experience, an absolute nightmare, one I never want to face again. Story 3: Mysterious Sounds from Chimneys. Living in the countryside, I am used to the quiet of the suburbs, where only the sound of the wind and the sounds of nature are my companions. But one night, everything changed. At about 2:35 a.m., a strange noise woke me from my sleep. The sound was like a violent impact, as if something had crashed into the roof, followed by the sound of glass hitting our metal chimney. The noise continued continuously for about an hour, a sound that should not have happened because we had blocked the chimney the previous summer. The repetition of the banging sound from inside the chimney made me feel nervous and uneasy. The banging sounds echoed as if someone was struggling to escape, creating a creepy and tense feeling. That noise was non-stop and made the surrounding atmosphere heavier. At that moment, the main door began to make rattling sounds, as if someone was trying to pull the door open to get inside. This sound increased my anxiety, each rattle echoing in the dark night. I tiptoed closer to the door, trying to look through the peephole to determine the source of the noise. But outside there was only darkness, no sign of anyone or anything unusual. The dark night and quiet made everything blurry and unpredictable. Finally, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, I opened the door. Instantly, all sounds stopped, and silence covered the house like a thin layer of fabric. The feeling of fear and suspense still hung in the air, as if something terrible had just happened and then suddenly disappeared. I stood there, in the darkness of the night, with the feeling that everything that had just happened was not a mere coincidence, but could be a sign of something worse silently lurking in the darkness. Story 4: Layla's hysterical barking. On a hot summer day, when the summer heat filled the house, I sat alone in the living room, engrossed in the movie playing on TV. The living room is softly lit by the light from the screen, creating a tranquil atmosphere. But that peace was broken by a strange sound coming from the ceiling. Unpredictable crunching and clicking noises echoed from above, where the attic was located. The living room ceiling is quite high, and there is not much possibility to reach the loft easily. I lowered the volume of the TV, trying to better hear the sounds coming from it. The noise became increasingly clearer, like someone was moving or trying to make noise in the attic. I know that the attic can only be accessed through my brother's bedroom, through a small door attached to his closet. With a feeling of nervousness and anxiety, I walked towards my brother's wardrobe, opening the door to access the attic. The light in the attic had long since broken, so I could only use a flashlight to illuminate the path ahead. When I entered the attic, just 2 steps in, the noise suddenly became clearer. The wood beneath my feet creaked, echoing weak but haunting sounds. A feeling of uneasiness welled up inside me, as if something was lurking beneath the wood. As I moved deeper into the attic, the sound changed again. A soft noise like something hitting one of the plastic bags on the floor made me jump. The feeling of uncontrollable panic caused me to quickly retreat. I jumped out of the attic, slammed the door with force, and immediately called my parents. The feeling of fear could not be suppressed. When my dad got home and checked the attic, he didn't find any signs of intrusion or unusual activity. Even though he confirmed that there was nothing strange, I still felt uneasy. Gratitude prevailed that my room wasn't connected to the attic, because imagining what might have happened had I gone deeper filled me with horror. The strange sounds and the feeling of being watched are still haunting my mind, making the hot summer day more oppressive and scary than ever. Story 5: Layla's hysterical barking. When it's just me and my dog Layla at home, the atmosphere in the house seems quieter than usual. To dispel the feeling of loneliness, I turned on the music loudly in my room. The sound of the music echoed throughout the house, making everything bustling and lively. However, despite the loud music, I could still hear Layla's frantic barking from another room. The sound was not like her normal barks, but rather a bark full of panic and anxiety. I left the room to check the situation, going downstairs. As I was going down, Layla's barking continued. Now it seemed like she was stomping down to the basement. Even though the music was playing quite loudly, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of anxiety when I saw Layla in the basement. I continued following the sound. The light of the stairwell lights began to glow as I turned on the basement lights. When I reached the basement, the sight made me feel scared and uneasy. Layla stood in an attack position, barking incessantly at the closed door leading to the boiler room. She jumped onto the door, scratching at it with wild strength, seemingly trying to break it open and get inside. Her growling barks, jumps, and scratches at the door created a creepy scene, and Layla's aggression heightened my anxiety. With a feeling of fear, I knocked on the door, trying to ask if anyone was inside, although I didn't really expect an answer. Layla was almost crazy, couldn't stop jumping up and scratching at the door, making me feel like something extremely dangerous was lurking behind that door. My decision became clear: if there really was something in the boiler room, I didn't want to know what it was. With determination, I pulled Layla's collar, led her back upstairs, and slammed the basement door, locking it. My heart pounded loudly in my chest when I heard my father's footsteps as he arrived home. When you arrived, I asked you to check the boiler room. However, on the way there, my father discovered a ladder leaning it against the wall next to the basement window, and the window had been smashed. When my father saw that situation, he immediately called the police. The worried sound in his voice could not hide the suspicion and panic. I stood silently, not sure what was going on, but the feeling of fear kept rising inside me. After the police arrived and checked, it turned out that Layla had been barking because an intruder was trying to enter the house through the window. A feeling of luck overwhelmed me, knowing that I had not opened the boiler door and could have avoided a dangerous situation. Those images and sounds still haunt my mind, a terrifying reminder of the dangers lurking in the quiet of summer afternoons. Story 6: Haunting from a Strange Neighbor. Living alone at night is quite normal for me because my father works the night shift and is often away from home. On nights when he worked, I often stayed up late to watch movies, looking for ways to make the time pass more comfortably. After turning off the TV and falling into bed, I usually have to lie there for quite a while before I can fall asleep. One particular night, about half an hour after I had turned off the lights and lay still in the dark, I began to hear strange noises. The first sound was a toy falling from my toy cabinet. Although it wasn't a very loud noise, it was enough to make me feel nervous. I'm used to being alone at night, but this sound makes me feel uneasy. Trying to calm myself down, I suddenly saw the toy cabinet door start to wiggle, as if someone was trying to open it. The closet door creaked and slowly opened, creating a strange and scary sound in the stillness of the night. In a panic, I retreated under the covers, trying not to make any noise. The silence in the room became heavy and strange, making me feel like something was lurking beyond the thin fabric of the blanket. 2 minutes passed like an eternity, and I decided to finally poke my head out to see what was going on. As I slowly lifted my head from the blanket, the sight immediately stopped my heart. A figure stood next to the bed, looking down at me with soulless eyes. My heart pounded, and fear completely took hold of me. I screamed in panic, my body felt stiff, and I began to hug the wall behind me, as if it were the only protection in this terrifying moment. That figure didn't show any reaction to my scream. After a while, he turned to look out the window and then slowly walked out of the room. I remained in that position for about an hour, not daring to move, constantly checking to see if the figure had really left. The front door of the house was left wide open, which made me think the figure had left. Feelings of stress and anxiety do not let go easily. That night, I couldn't sleep for a minute. Every little noise startled me. The feeling of fear and obsession from the incident made the whole room colder and scarier than ever. Story 7: Haunting from a Strange Neighbor. When I was 16 years old, my life was affected by the strange appearance of a boy who lived next door. His name is Joey. Every time I go out, I always feel Joey's eyes following me from his window. Joey, 17, is a strange and somewhat aloof person who doesn't seem to have any friends. He was always home, and although I tried to make it clear that I didn't want any contact with him, Joey didn't pick up on my signals. Finally, one day I was forced to face the situation. I told Joey directly that I didn't like him and asked him to keep his distance. Facing me at that time, Joey seemed unable to accept it. The expression on his face was like a toddler throwing a tantrum when he couldn't get the toy he wanted. That look, the anger and disappointment, never left me, and it became an unforgettable obsession. One night, when my parents went out so I could look after the house, I was busy with a study project. I felt my bed shift slightly, a strange feeling that caught my attention. When I looked under the bed, a terrible scene appeared before my eyes. Joey was lying under the bed, his face revealed from the darkness, his eyes cold and scary. Panic surged through me, and I screamed, a scream that echoed in the quiet room. Immediately, I ran away, trying to escape the horrifying scene, while Joey tried to crawl out from under the bed. I ran to Joey's house, ringing the doorbell repeatedly, at least 10 times, to try to notify his parents of the situation. When the door was opened, Joey's parents looked confused and begged me not to call the police, but I didn't listen to them. The police were called and arrived quickly. When police checked the room, they found Joey still there. He was immediately arrested. Joey admitted that this wasn't the first time he'd hidden under my bed. In fact, he had done this many times before. In his room, the police also discovered photos of me scattered everywhere. Those photos included one of me sleeping, taken from under my bed. Those images and events left me with a deep sense of fear, making me never forget my obsession with Joey and what he did. Story 8: Mysterious Man in the Forest. Living in the countryside, where there are no close neighbors, I am often home alone. One of my habits is sitting outside in the yard to enjoy the sunshine during summer days. On a hot sunny day, as I was lying on a bench in the yard tanning, I felt the quiet of the countryside broken by a feeling of uneasiness. When my eyes accidentally glanced through the nearby forest, I noticed a person standing there, secretly looking at me. The feeling of fear made me immediately sit up, preparing to stand up and run into the house. I tried my best to calm down and shouted from afar, asking if that person needed anything. He stepped out of the darkness of the forest, walking towards me with a calm expression. He said he lived on a hill and needed help with a broken water pump. Although his explanation seemed reasonable, I felt uncomfortable and could not dare to go with him. I made the excuse that I was going out and didn't have time to help, but that was just an excuse to avoid further contact. Having finished speaking, he returned to the forest, and I observed him pass over a large rock, then gradually disappear from sight. The feeling of indescribable fear made me quickly fold up the waiting room chair and quickly go inside the house. I make sure all doors and windows are locked tightly. I thought it was over when I went back inside, but about an hour later I realized I had forgotten to take my sunglasses out into the yard. I decided to go back and get them, trying not to think too much about what happened. Before going out, I observed the surrounding area to make sure strangers were no longer nearby. I looked for sunglasses in the yard, worried and couldn't stop thinking about the image of that man. When I finally found my sunglasses, I looked up and felt my heart stop. That man appeared again, but this time he was not standing in the forest. Instead, he was hiding behind our shed, only half of his body exposed, a sight that sent shivers down my spine. His presence, this time closer and more visible, panicked me. I yelled that I was going to call the police, then rushed inside to do it. The police arrived quickly and wrote down a description of the strange man I had encountered. Thankfully, after checking, they confirmed that the man had never been recorded in the area before, and he was no longer seen. The feeling of security only returned when I knew that there was no trace of him left in the area. But the images and fears still haunted me long after the incident. Story 9: Scary Calls from Strangers. The memory of a scary incident that happened when I was just 7 years old is still as clear as it was yesterday. I often stay overnight at my grandmother's house. She doesn't drive and always walks everywhere. One day, she decided to walk to the library, about 10 blocks away. I, a lazy child, didn't want to walk with her, so she left me home alone and told me not to open the door to anyone. When she left, I was alone in the quiet house. A moment later, the phone rang. I, with the curiosity of a child, picked up the phone. On the other end of the line was a man, and I remember his voice very clearly. He asked my name and then said his name was Danny, and asked if I knew if my parents were home. I replied that I was home alone at the moment and told him my grandmother's address in Queens. After hanging up, I didn't think much about the call and continued with my work. About an hour later, while I was sitting on the couch, there was a sudden knock on the door. Following her instructions, I did not open the door. I looked out the window and saw the man, Danny, standing on the porch, staring at me. He looks very scary with his gray, ugly appearance and fat beer belly. My heart was pounding. A feeling of fear spread throughout my body. Danny didn't leave but stood there looking at me with menacing eyes. I felt confused and hurriedly ran into the guest bedroom, where I usually sleep, and locked the door immediately. I heard the back door being wrenched open, followed by continuous banging as he tried to break the door open. That sound, Danny's constant attempts to get into the house, made me feel like I was in a nightmare. Luckily, my grandmother returned just in time. I heard her voice shouting loudly, scolding Danny and threatening to call the police. She tried to get his license plate number, but unfortunately, she couldn't remember it. I watched out the window as Danny hurriedly jumped into his old pickup truck and drove off. My grandmother reported the incident and described the car to the police. Although my grandmother reported the incident to the police, my mother did not believe that she could watch over me again. I knew that if she came even a little later, I don't know what would happen to me. Feelings of fear and anxiety remained with me long after the incident, and I never forgot the feeling of being alone and helpless in the face of danger. Story 10: Horrified Face in the Vent. When I first moved into my new house, I didn't think much about it. The house is small enough for only 1 or 2 people to live, nothing outstanding. However, from the moment I started living there, I felt something was wrong. From the first time, I heard strange sounds coming from inside the walls. At first, I just thought it was noise from the kitchen, then in the bathroom, but by the third night, strange sounds began to appear in my bedroom. It seemed like there was some kind of animal living in the walls of the house. I told myself that the next morning, I would have to find a way to get rid of it. However, at the time, I felt extremely confused and tired, especially when I realized I didn't have enough milk to fill my cereal bowl, a small detail that made me feel the situation was getting worse. That night, as I was lying in bed, I was awakened by a strange sound, not my breathing, but someone else's breathing. I turned on the light, and the sound stopped immediately. At that moment, I thought that maybe my mind was playing tricks on me, but the insecurity didn't leave me. The next morning, it was very hot, and I decided to turn on the air conditioning for the first time since moving in. When checking the vents, I noticed some of them weren't blowing any air. One of the vents is right next to my bed. I decided to look through the vent with a flashlight. That's when I discovered something strange. The vent doesn't have an air duct behind it. It's just in the wall. It looks like the air duct has been removed. I didn't realize this problem when I bought the house, and that made me feel even more insecure. That night, without air conditioning, I had to lie in the heat, unable to sleep. I continued tossing and turning in bed, the feeling of discomfort increasing. And then, The strange sound appeared again. This time I was completely awake and knew for sure that it was not my imagination. I listened and realized the sound was coming from my left. I looked to the left, toward the vent. When I shined the flashlight through the vent, I couldn't believe my eyes. I dropped the flashlight and screamed when I saw the face of someone looking through the gap. The person's eyes were wide open and bright, staring at me. The feeling of horror made me run out of the house without thinking much. Immediately, I discovered that there was an extremely dangerous homeless man living inside the walls of the house. He has been secretly eating my food since I moved in. An indescribable feeling of fear and anxiety caused me to quickly leave the house, realizing that I had fallen into a much more dangerous and terrifying situation than I had imagined. When the light of day returns, the fears may recede, but the memories of the scary still linger in the mind. These stories are not only personal experiences, but also a reminder that loneliness can bring unexpected things. Always be alert, because in the dark, there may be something waiting for you. Strange sounds, shadowy figures, and mysterious calls may never completely go away. Don't forget that sometimes the scariest thing is not what you see, but what you can't see.